Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, we understand Harry has dropped his libel case against the Associated Newspapers. Can you tell us what happened and why?
Well, it came as quite a shock, actually, because the day that his legal team was supposed to submit evidence, it was revealed that he was dropping the case against the publishers of the Mail on Sunday for that article that was written in February 2022, which he claims was libelous against him. It was regards to his fight for his armed security with the Home Office. Now, we remember that a few weeks ago, the judge actually ruled that the Associated Newspapers Group can actually use the defense of honest opinion moving forward in the trial, but he for some reason has decided to randomly drop the case, and it's alleged that he's going to be footing the bill of about £750,000. So £250,000 of that is actually the legal bill for Associated Newspapers for even going ahead with this sort of court case in the first place, and then the rest of his legal team. We don't understand why. Obviously, he's not dropping the other cases against other newspaper groups for phone hacking and other claims of unlawful information gathering, but he has randomly dropped this case. He's still moving forward with his case against the Home Office to try and reinstate his armed security. He's still keeping on that fight and saying that he is wholly dedicated to trying to protect his family. But for some reason, this libelous case has been dropped. Now, one thing that was interesting that his legal team did claim with this case was that it actually defamed him and it damaged his reputation as an honest person. That's a very interesting claim, and it's interesting that he's not willing to defend that any further, but I suspect it has something to do with the fact that it looked like he wasn't going to win that case, and it would have just been a waste of his time and money.
Also reported this week are claims that the Queen was angered by Harry and Meghan, calling their daughter Lilibet. Now, how has this come to light now, and are you surprised at all that the Queen was upset about this?
Yeah, so this story is quite an interesting one because obviously the Queen is not alive to speak for herself, but these are claims that have arisen from King Charles's latest biography written by Robert Hardman, stating that the Queen was actually very angry. So apparently, courtiers that were close to the Queen said that she'd been as angry as they'd ever seen her over the fact that Harry and Meghan chose to name their second child, their daughter Lilibet. Now, I suspect it wasn't the fact that they chose that name for their daughter, but I think it was the way that it was done. So immediately after it was revealed that Harry and Meghan's second child was going to be called Lilibet, Harry and Meghan's PR team basically released a statement to the BBC and other media outlets here in the UK that actually Harry had got explicit consent from the Queen. And the reason why I suspect they put out this statement is because everyone knows that Lilibet is a nickname for the late Queen because she wasn't able to say her name as a child, so she called herself Lilibet. And it's a close nickname that only members of her own family, her husband, her sister, the late Queen, Princess Margaret, used for her. But the problem is the Buckingham Palace refused to corroborate that story, and actually there was a bit of a kind of tension between Harry and Meghan's team and Buckingham Palace because the palace refused to say actually yes, the Queen has given explicit consent. And I think it was the potential fallout from that stressed out the Queen because it's not something that she was interested in dealing with. She wasn't interested in kind of developing a media tit for tat for the sake of Harry and Meghan saving face and saying actually the Queen gave her consent. I do suspect though that the Queen may not have necessarily consented in the way that Harry thinks she did. Because we know that the royal family are very traditional, and if she was happy to go ahead with this, or if she was happy for their daughter to have her nickname, which is something that only close friends and family call her, I think there would have been something written there. There would have been written evidence, and Harry and Meghan's team can say, look, the Queen says this is fine. Not that they necessarily have to ask her for permission, because it is a name and she doesn't own the name, but it is, courteous and something that respectful people would do, particularly when you are of the notoriety of the Queen. I don't know if the words that the Queen allegedly used are accurate. It doesn't sound very much like her, but it's also quite foreign and unusual to hear direct words from the Queen that she hasn't uttered in a speech or anything like that, because we know that the Queen was very private and she was very discerning in the kinds of things that she said. But I do suspect that it was actually the kind of potential media fallout and the head-to-head between Buckingham Palace and Harry and Meghan's team refusing to corroborate stories and all of that. That's probably what the Queen was unhappy about.
Now, Harry and Andrew, they've also recently been replaced as councillors of the state. This was all done very quietly. What does that mean, and who replaces them?
So the Councillors of State bill that was submitted last year for the year 2022-2023, just after the King's accession, actually had a small amendment that has recently been discovered, which basically states that only working royal members of the royal family can become Councillors of State. And now it's become particularly relevant because the King is taking time off to have surgery for a routine procedure, but he is still going to be able to fulfill his constitutional role as head of state, just not the ceremonial ones of, charities and going to events and all of that. But because of that small amendment of working royals, that effectively disqualifies Prince Andrew, certainly, who I still think should be banished to Goa, and Prince Harry and Princess Beatrice, who's not a working member of the royal family. So, traditionally, councillors of state have been the spouse of the monarch, and then the next four in line to the throne over the age of 21, which of course nullifies Prince William's children. But by adding the working royal stipulation, that effectively nullifies Harry and Prince Andrew, who are technically still councillors of state, but actually not eligible to carry out the role.
Now, the recent illnesses of both the King and the Princess of Wales illustrate just how important these roles are. Are there enough members of the royal family to fill the void?
It seems so. I mean, we have to remember that the King is not going to be off for very long. This is a very routine procedure for an enlarged prostate, which is a very common condition. I mean, 90% of men over the age of 80 suffer from it. So if you're a man and you happen to live that long, it is likely that you will undergo this procedure. So it's just the King, one senior member of the royal family that will be off for at least a few weeks. It's Princess Catherine who's going to be off until at least Easter. And obviously because of that, Prince William is going to take some time off as well, just to be there for her and their children. He's likely to take on some of her engagements between now and that time. And there unfortunately have been speculations that Harry could have stepped in if he and Meghan were still in the royal family, but that ship has sailed. But they're going to work around it. I mean, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh are still taking on a lot of roles, and Princess Anne, who shows no signs of slowing down. Last year she was the hardest working royal with the most royal engagements for 2023. So it looks like they're just going to shuffle their calendars and somehow make it work. But obviously this does remind us that there are fewer members of the royal family, working members of the royal family, to carry out their duties, and someone like Prince Andrew is completely out of the picture, rightly so.
Esther Krakue, excellent observations as usual. Thank you so much for joining us.